ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय।
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 नष्ट प्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्ति भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। तो पढ़ोगे, तुम पढ़ोगे? हम्म।
मुक्तो वर्तत ब्रह्म पुरुषस्य कुरुद्वाह युस्तून मुख त्वादर नाम मुख्यो भूद्रवो हृणो गुरु।
मुक्तो वर्तत ब्रह्म पुरुषस्य कुरुद्वः यस्तुन्मुखत्वार्धानां मुख्यो भूर्द्वाहम्मणो गुरुः।
O chief of Kuru dynasty, the Vedic wisdom became manifested from the mouth of the virāṭ, the gigantic form. Those who are inclined to this Vedic knowledge are called brāhmaṇas, and they are natural teachers and spiritual master of all the order of society.
हम्म।
As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 4.13, the four orders of human society developed with the order of the body of the gigantic form. The bodily divisions. The bodily divisions are the mouth, arm, waist, legs. Those who are situated on the mouth are called brāhmanas. Those who are situated on the arms are called kṣatriya. And those who are situated on the waist are called vaiśyas. And those who are situated on the legs are called śūdras. Everyone is situated in the body of the Supreme in his gigantic Vishwarup form. In terms of the four orders, therefore, no caste is to be considered degraded because of being situated on a particular part of the body. In our own bodies, we do not show any actual difference in our treatment towards the hands or legs. Each and every part of the body is important, although the mouth is the most important of the bodily parts. If other parts are cut off from the body, a man can continue his life. But if mouth is cut off, one cannot live. Therefore, this most important part of the body of the Lord is called the sitting place of the Brahmanas, who are inclined to the Vedic wisdom. One who is not inclined to the Vedic wisdom but to mundane affairs cannot be called a Brahman, even if he is born of a Brahman family or father. To have a Brahman father does not qualify one as a Brahman. The main qualification of Brahman is to be inclined to the Vedic wisdom. The Vedas are situated on the mouth of the Lord, and therefore, anyone who is inclined to the Vedic wisdom is certainly situated on the mouth of the Lord, and he is Brahman. This inclination towards Vedic wisdom is also not restricted to any particular caste or community. Anyone from any family and from any part of the world may become inclined to the Vedic wisdom, and that will qualify him as a real Brahman. A real Brahman is the natural teacher or spiritual master. Unless one has Vedic knowledge, one cannot become a spiritual master. The perfect knowledge of the Vedas is to know the Lord, the personality of Godhead, and that is the end of the Vedic knowledge or Vedan. One who is situated in the impersonal Brahman and has no information of the Supreme Personality of Godhead may become a Brahman, but he cannot become a spiritual master. It is said in the Padma Puran. सत्कर्म निपुनो विप्रो मंत्र तंत्र विशारद 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 अवैष्णवो गुरु न स्याद वैष्णव स्व
पचो गुरु।
पचो गुरु जी। An impersonal can become a qualified Brahman, but he cannot become a spiritual master unless and until he is promoted to the stage of Vaishnava or a devotee of the personality of Godhead. Lord Chaitanya, the great authority of Vedic wisdom in the modern age, stated, किभा विप्र किभा न्यासी शूद्र केने नय ये कृष्णा तत्ववेत्ता से गुरु है. A person may be a brahmana or sudra or a sannyasi, but if he happens to be well versed in the science of Krishna, then he is fit to become a spiritual master. The qualification then of a spiritual master is not to be a qualified Brahmin, but to be well versed in the science of Krishna. One who is conversant with Vedic wisdom is a Brahman, and only a Brahman who is pure Vaishnava and knows all the intricacies of the science of Krishna can become a spiritual master.
ये वाला जो श्लोक है, इसके परपोर्ट में तो प्रभुपाद ने काफी बातें बताई, हालांकि श्लोक में भी है कि भाई अब जैसे तुम लोग या हम भी क्या नाम है, हम लोग कम से कम तीन ही ब्राह्मण तो हैं ही हैं, है ना. वी आर
जी
ट्राइंग टू गेन द वैदिक नॉलेज, है ना, है ना. और अगर डिवोटी भी है सुप्रीम लॉर्ड के, तो देन यू कैन बिकम ए स्पिरिचुअल मास्टर.
जी
इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि क्या नाम है ये कोई टाइटल है या कोई है, बट इट इट नीड्स टू बी प्रैक्टिस्ड. काफी उन्होंने बताया, द मेन क्वालिफिकेशन ऑफ ब्राह्मण इज टू बी इंक्लाइंड टू द वैदिक विजडम. As are situated on the mouth of the Lord, and therefore anyone who is inclined to the Vedic wisdom is certainly situated on the mouth of the Lord and is a Brahman. Anyone from any family and from any part of the world may become inclined to the Vedic wisdom, and that will qualify him as a real Brahman. और फिर उस पर चैतन्य महाप्रभु ने भी अल्टीमेटली मोहर लगाई है ना.
जी
तो ये जो है ना, मतलब दैट ऑल्सो एंजॉयंस, अगर आपको ये चीज है ये, तो फिर इट ऑल्सो एंजॉयंस कि भाई आप जो है ना, यू शुड स्प्रेड इट ऑल्सो. चलो
जी
टेक्स्ट 31.
हाँ. बाहुभ्यो वर्तच्छतम क्षत्रिय स्तदनुव्रतः यो जात स्त्रायते वर्णान पौरुषः कष्ट कक्षतात.
बाहुभ्यो वर्तत क्षत्रम क्षत्रिय स्तदनुव्रतः यो जात स्त्रायते वर्णान पौरुषः कंठ कक्षतात.
जी. Thereafter, the power of protection was generated from the arms of gigantic virāṭ form, and in relation to such power of the Kshatriya also came into existence by following the Kshatriya principle of protecting society from disturbance of thieves and miscreants. Purport. As the Brahmins are recognized by their particular qualification of inclination towards the transcendental knowledge of Vedic wisdom, so also Kshatriya are recognized by the power to protect society from disturbing elements of thieves and miscreants. The word anuvrata is significant. A person who follows the Kshatriya principle by protecting society from thieves and miscreants is called Kshatriya, not the one who is simply born a Kshatriya. The conception of the caste system is always based on quality and not on the qualification of birth. Birth is an extraneous consideration. It is not the main feature of the orders and divisions. In Bhagavad Gita 18.41 to 44, the qualification of the Brahmanas, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudras are specifically mentioned, and it is understood that all such qualifications are needed before one can be designated as belonging to a particular group. Lord Vishnu is always mentioned as the Purush in all Vedic scriptures. Sometimes the living entities are also mentioned as Purush, although they are essentially Purush Shakti, Parashakti, or Para Prakriti. The superior energy of the Purush, illusioned by the external potency of the Purush or the Lord. The living entities falsely think of themselves as the Purush, although they actually have no qualifications. The Lord has the power to protect. Of the three deities, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, the first has the power to create, the second has the power to protect, and the third has the power to destroy. The word Purush is significant in this verse because the Kshatriya are expected to represent the Purush Lord in giving protection to the prajās, or all those who are born in the land and water. Protection is therefore meant for both man and animals. In modern society, the prajās are not protected from the hands of the thieves and miscreants. The modern democratic state, which has no kshatriya, is a government of the vaiśyas and śūdras and not of brāhmaṇas and kshatriya as formerly. Maharaja Yudhishthir and his grandson Maharaja Parikshit were typical Kshatriya kings, for they gave protection to all men and animals. When the personification of Kali attempted to kill a cow, Maharaja Parikshit at once prepared himself to kill the miscreant, and the personification of Kali was banished from his kingdom. That is the sign of Purush, or the representative of Lord Vishnu. According to Vedic civilization, a qualified Kshatriya monarch is given the respect of the Lord because he represents the Lord by giving protection to the prajās. Modern elected presidents cannot even give protection from theft cases, and therefore one has to take protection from an insurance company. The protection of modern human society are due to the lack of qualified brahmanas and kshatriya and the poor influence of vaiśyas and śūdras by so-called general franchise.
हम्म हम्म
जी
बता रहे करे मैं
जी जी जी
तक ठीक भी है
विशो वर्तंत तस्योर तस्योर वो व्योर लोक वृत्ति करीर विभो वैश वैश वैश्यस्त दुदब्धवो वार्ताम नृणाम यह समवर्तयत्
विशो वर्तन्त तस्योर्वलोक वृत्तिकरीर विभो वैश्यस्तदुदभवो वार्ताम नृणाम यह समवर्तयत्.
The means of livelihood of all persons, namely production of grains and their distribution to the prajās, was generated from the thighs of Lord's gigantic form. The mercantile men who take charge of such execution are called vaiśyas.
वैश्यास.
Vaiśyas. Purport. Human society's means of living is clearly mentioned here as
विश्व or agriculture.
Agriculture and the business of distributing agriculture products which involve transport, banking, etc. Industry is an artificial means of livelihood, and large-scale industry especially is the source of of all the problems of society. In Bhagavad Gita also the duties of the Vaishyas who are engaged in this are stated as cow protection, agriculture, and business. We have already discussed that the human being can safely depend on cow and agriculture land for his livelihood. The exchange of produce by banking and transportation is a branch of this type of living. The Vaishyas are divided into many subsections. Some of them are called kṣatriya or landowners. Some are called kṣatriya or land tillers. Some of them are called tilvanik or grain raisers. Some are called gadvanik or merchants in spices, and some are called suvarnvanik or merchants in gold and banking. The brāhmaṇas are the teachers and spiritual masters. The Kshatriya protect the citizens from the hands of thieves and miscreants, and vaiśyas are in charge of production and distribution. The śūdras, the unintelligent class of men who cannot act independently in any of the above mentioned activities, are meant for serving the three higher classes for their livelihood. Formerly, the Brahmins were given all the necessities of life by the Kshatriya and Vaiśyas because they had no time to spend making a living. The Kshatriya would collect taxes from the Vaiśyas and śūdras, but the Brahmins were exempt from paying income tax or land revenue. That system of human society was so nice that there was no political, social, or economical upheavals. The different caste or varnas classifications are therefore essential for maintaining a peaceful human society.
हम्म हम्म है बात मेक
जी
सेंस।
जी
मैं पढ़ता
पद
हूँ।
जी
टेक्स्ट 33 पद्म भयाम भगवतो यज्ञे शुश्रूषा धर्म सिद्धये तस्याम जातः पुरा शूद्रो यद वृत्त्या तुष्यते हरिः।
हम्म। पद्भ्याम भगवतो यज्ञे शुश्रूषा धर्म सिद्धये तस्याम जाता पुरा शूद्रो यद्वृत्त्या तुष्यते हरि।
क्या तुष्यते हरिः। Thereafter, service was manifested from the legs of the personality of Godhead for the sake of performing the religious functions. Situated on the legs are Shudras who satisfy the Lord by service. Service is the real constitutional position of all living entities. The living entities are meant to render service to the Lord, and they can attain religious perfection by this service attitude. One cannot attain religious perfection simply by speculating to attain theoretical knowledge. The Jnani division of the spiritualists go on speculating only to distinguish the soul from the matter. But they have no information of the activities of the soul after being liberated by the knowledge. It is said that the persons who only mentally speculate to know things as they are and who do not engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord are simply wasting their time. It is clearly said here that the principle of service was generated from the legs of the Lord for the sake of perfecting the religious process. But this transcendental service is different from the idea of service in the material world. In the material world, no one wants to be a servant. Everyone wants to become the master because false mastership is the basic disease of the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul in the material world wants to lord it over others. Illusioned by the external energy of the Lord, he is forced to become a servant of the material world. That is the real position of the conditioned soul. The last snare of the illusory external energy is the conception of becoming one with the Lord. And due to this conception, the illusioned soul remains in the bondage of material energy, falsely thinking himself as a liberated soul and as good as Narayan. ये मायावाद की फिलॉसफी है. It is actually better to be a Shudra than to be a Brahmana and not to develop the service attitude, because that attitude alone satisfies the Lord. Every living being, even if he is a Brahman by qualification, must take to the transcendental service of the Lord. Both Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagwatam support that this service attitude is the perfection of the living entity. A Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra can perfect his occupational duties only by rendering service unto the Lord. A Brahman is supposed to know this fact due to his perfection in Vedic wisdom. The other sections are supposed to follow the directions of Brahman Vaishnava, who is Brahman by qualification and Vaishnava by action. That will make the entire society perfect in regard to the order of social construction. A disordered society cannot satisfy either the member of the society or the Lord. Even if one is not a perfect Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra, but takes to the service of the Lord, not caring for the perfection of his social position, he becomes a perfect human being simply by developing the attitude of service to the Supreme Lord. ये लास्ट सेंटेंस बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट है.
हम्म,
Even if one is not a perfect Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra, but takes to the service of the Lord, not caring for perfection of his social position, he becomes a perfect human being simply by developing the attitude of service to the Supreme Lord. Okay.
जी.
34. एते वर्णा स्वधर्मेण यजन्ति स्वगुरुम हरिम श्रद्धया विशुद्धयर्थम यज्ञाता सह वृत्तिभिः
एते वर्णाः स्वधर्मेण
यजन्ति
जयन्ति
स्वगुरुम
स्वगुरुं
हरिम
हरिं
श्रद्धया
श्रद्धयात् विशुद्धयर्थं यज्जाता सह वृत्तिभिः.
All these different social divisions are born with their occupational duties and living conditions from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, for unconditional life and self-realization, one has to worship the Supreme Lord under the direction of the spiritual master. Since they are born from the different parts of the body of the Supreme Lord in his gigantic form, all living entities in all parts of the entire universe are supposed to be eternal servitors of the Supreme Body. Every part of our own body, such as mouth, hand, thighs, and legs, is meant to render service to the whole. That is their constitutional position in subhuman life. The living entities are not conscious of this constitutional position. But in the human form of life, they are supposed to know this through the system of varnas and the social order. As above mentioned, the Brahmana is the spiritual master of all orders of society, and thus Brahminical culture culminating in the transcendental service of the Lord is the basic principle of purifying the soul. In conditioned life, the soul is under the impression that he can become the Lord of the universe. And the last point of this misconception is to think oneself the supreme. The foolish conditioned soul does not take into account that the supreme cannot be conditioned by maya or illusion. If the supreme were to become conditioned by illusion, where would be his supremacy? In that case, maya or illusion would be the supreme. Therefore, because living entities are conditioned, they cannot be supreme. The actual position of the conditioned soul is explained in this verse. All the conditioned souls are pure due to contact with the material in the three modes of nature. All the conditioned souls are impure due to contact with the material energy in the three modes of nature. Therefore, it is necessary that they purify themselves under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, who not only is a Brahmana by qualification but must also be a Vaishnava. The only self-purifying process mentioned herein is to the worship the Lord under the recognized method, under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master. That is the natural way of purification, and no other method is recommended as bona fide. The other methods of purification may be helpful to come to this stage of life, but ultimately one has to come to this last point before he attains actual perfection. Bhagavad Gita 7.19 confirms this truth also. बहुनानाम जन्मनानाम अन्ते ज्ञानवान माम प्रपद्यन्ते वासुदेव सर्वम इति स महात्मा सुदुर्लभा. ये बात है ना. टेक्स्ट 35. एक सप्त भगवतो दैव कर्मात्म रूपिण कह श्रद्धया दुपाकर्तम योग माया बलोदयम.
जी.
एतत्
छत्तर भगवतो दैव कर्मात्म रूपिण कह योग माया बलोदयम.
O Vidur, who can estimate or measure the transcendental time, work, and potency of gigantic form manifested by the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Purport: the froggish philosophers may go on with their mental speculations on the subject matter of the virāṭ, the gigantic form exhibited by the Yog Maya internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But factually, no one can measure such vast exhibition. Bhagavad Gita 11.16. Arjun, the recognized devotee of the Lord, says, Aneka Bahu Daravaktra Netram Pashyami Tvam Sarvato Nantarupam Nanatam na Madhyam na Purastvadim Pashyami Vishveshwara Vishwarupa. O my Lord, O gigantic Vishwarup form, O Master of the universe, I see innumerable hands, bodies, mouth, and eyes in all directions, and they are all unlimited. I cannot find the end of this manifestation, nor do I see the middle, nor the beginning. Virāṭ Roop. Bhagavad Gita was specifically spoken to Arjun, and the Vishwarup was exhibited before him at his request. He was awarded the specific eyes to see this Vishrupa, yet although he was able to see the Lord's innumerable hands and mouths, he was unable to see him completely. Since Arjun was unable to estimate the length and breadth of the potency of the Lord, who else would be able to do so? One may indulge in miscalculation like the frog philosopher. The frog philosophers wanted to estimate the length and breadth of the Pacific Ocean by experience of a well 3 cubic feet by large, and thus he began to puff himself up to become as big as the Pacific Ocean. But at last he burst and died by the process. This story is applicable to the mental philosophers who, under the illusion of the Lord's external energy, indulge in the estimation of length and breadth of the Supreme Lord. The best path is to become a cool headed, submissive devotee of the Lord. Try to hear about the Lord from bona fide spiritual master and thus serve the Lord in transcendental loving service. ये बात है
जी
ठीक है
जी
हाँ ये लास्ट वाला
आपको पढ़ा है जी
मेरा हो गया ना 3
हाँ इसीलिए जी मैं पढ़ देता हूँ
यस 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 यू गो अहेड प्लीज
तथापि कीर्ति यामं यथामति यथाश्रुतं कीर्तिम हरेः स्वाम सत्कुरुतं गिरम गिरम मन्याभि धास्तीम
तथापि कीर्तयाम्यंगम यथामति यथाश्रुतम कीर्ति हरे स्वसत्कर्तुम गिरमन्याभिधासतीम.
In spite of my inability, whatever I have been able to hear from the spiritual master and whatever I could assimilate, I am now describing in glorification of the Lord by pure speech. For otherwise my power of speaking would remain unchaste. Purport. The purification of the conditioned soul necessitates purification of his consciousness. By the presence of consciousness, the presence of the transcendental soul is verified, and as soon as consciousness leaves the body, the material body is not active. Consciousness is perceived, therefore, by activities. The theory put forward by empiric philosophers that consciousness can remain in an inactive state is the proof of the poor fund of knowledge. One should not become unchaste by stopping the activities of pure consciousness. If the activities of pure consciousness are stopped, certainly the conscious living force will be otherwise engaged, because unless engaged, the consciousness has no standing. Consciousness cannot be silent even for a moment. When the body does not act, the conscious part in the form of dreams, unconsciousness is artificial. By induced extraneous help, it remains for a limited period. But when the intoxication of the drug is finished or when one is awake, the consciousness again acts earnestly. Maitreya's statement is that in order to avoid unchaste conscious activities, he was trying to describe the unlimited glories of the Lord, although he did not have the ability to describe them perfectly. This glorification of the Lord is not a product of research, but the result of hearing submissively from the authority of a spiritual master. It is also not possible to repeat all that one has heard from his spiritual master, but one can narrate as far as possible by one's honest endeavor. It does not matter whether the Lord's glories are fully explained or not. One must attempt to engage one's bodily, mental, and verbal activities in the transcendental glorification of the Lord. Otherwise, such activities will remain unchaste and impure. The existence of the conditioned soul can be purified only by the method of engaging mind and speech in the service of the Lord. The Tridandi Sannyasi
Three sannyasi.
of the Vaishnava school accept three rods, representing the vow to engage in the service of the Lord with body, mind, and speech. Whereas the Eka Dandi
Ek dandi.
Ek Gandhi sannyasi take the vow to become one with Supreme. Since the Lord is the Absolute, there is no distinction between Him and His glories. The glories of the Lord as chanted by Vaishno sannyasi are as substantial as the Lord Himself. And thus while glorifying the Lord, the devotee becomes one with Him in transcendental interest. Although he remains eternally a transcendental servitor, this simultaneously one and different position of the devotee makes him internally purified, and thus his life becomes a complete success. Text 37. एकांत लाभम वचसो नु पुंसाम सुश्लोक सुश्लोक मौलेर गुणवाद माहु श्रुतेश्च विद्वदभिरूपाकृतायाम कथा सुधायाम उपसंप्रयोगम
एकांत लाभम वचसो नुपुंसाम शुश्रोल कमौले रगुणवाद माहु श्रुतेश्च विद विदवद्भिरूपाकृतायाम कथा सुधायामुपसंप्रयोगम.
The highest perfectional gain of humanity is to engage in discussion of the activities and glories of the pious actor. Such activities are so nicely arranged in writing by the greatly learned sages that the actual purpose of the ear is served just by being near them. Purport. The impersonalists are very much afraid of hearing the activities of the Lord because they think that happiness derived from the transcendental situation of Brahman is the ultimate goal of life. They think that anyone's activity, even that of personality of Godhead, is mundane. But the idea of happiness indicated in the verse is different because it relates to the activities of the Supreme Personality who has transcendental qualities. The word gun vadam is significant because the qualities of the Lord and his activities and pastime are the subject matter for the discussion of devotees. A rishi like Maitri is certainly not interested in discussing anything pertaining to mundane qualities. And he says that the highest perfectional stage of transcendental realization is to discuss the Lord's activities. Srila Jiva Goswami therefore concludes that topic regarding the transcendental activities of the Lord are far beyond the transcendental realization of Keval happiness. These transcendental activities of the Lord are so arranged in writing by the great sages that simply by hearing of those narrations one becomes perfectly self-realized. and the proper use of the ear and tongue is also achieved. Srimad Bhagwatam is one such great literature, and the highest perfectional state of the life is attained simply by hearing and reciting its contents.
देख लिया, अपना सुन लिया ना.
Text 38. आत्मनो वसितो वत्स महिमा का विनादिना संवत् संवत्सर सह शांते धिया योग विपक्या.
आत्मनो वसितो वत्स महिमा कविना दिना संवत्सर सह स्त्रांते धिया योग विपक्यया.
O my son, the original poet Brahma, after mature meditation for 1000 celestial years, could know only that the glories of the Supreme Soul are inconceivable. There are some froggish philosophers who want to know the Supreme Soul by means of philosophy and mental speculation. And when the devotees who are to some extent in knowledge of the Supreme Lord admit that the glories of the Lord are inestimable or inconceivable, the froggish philosophy adversely criticize them. These philosophers, like the frog in the well who try to estimate the measurement of the Pacific Ocean, like to take trouble over fruitless mental speculation instead of taking instruction from devotees like the original poet, namely the Brahma. Lord Brahma underwent a severe type of meditation for 1000 celestial years, and he said that the glories of the Lord are inconceivable. Therefore, what can the froggish philosophers hope to gain from their mental speculation? It is said in Brahma Samhita that the mental speculator may fly through the sky of speculation with the velocity of the mind or the wind for thousands of millions of years, and still he will find it inconceivable. The devotees, however, do not waste time in such vain searching after knowledge of the Supreme, but they submissively hear the glories of the Lord from bona fide devotees. Thus they transcendently enjoy the process of hearing and chanting. The Lord approves of the devotional activities of the devotee or Mahatmas, and he says, Mahatmanas tu mam devim prakritim asrita ashrita bhajanti ananni manuso
अवव्याम सताताम की त्यंतो
bhutadim avyayam satatam kirtyanto mam yatantascha dradad vratah namasyantas cha mam bhaktya nitya yukta upasate. The pure devotees of the Lord take shelter of the para prakriti, the internal potency of the Lord called Lakshmi Devi, Sita Devi, Srimati Radharani, or Srimati Rukmani Devi, and thus they become actual Mahatmas or great souls. Mahatmas are not fond of indulging in mental speculation, but they actually take to the devotional service of the Lord without the slightest deviation. Devotional service is manifested by the primary process of hearing and chanting about the activities of the Lord. This transcendental method practiced by the Mahatmas gives them sufficient knowledge of the Lord, because if the Lord can at all be known to some extent, it is only through the means of devotional service and no other way. One may go on speculating and waste the valuable time of his human life, but this will not help anyone to enter into the precincts of the Lord. The Mahatmas, however, are not concerned with knowing the Lord by mental speculation, because they enjoy hearing about his glorious activities in his transcendental dealing with his devotees or with the demons. The devotees take place in both and are happy in this life and the life after. Text 39.
Correct.
अतो भगवतो माया माई नामपि मोहिनी यत् स्वयं चात्म वत वत वत्तरमात्मा न वेद किमुता परे.
अतो भगवतो माया मायिन मपि मोहिनी यतः स्वयं चात्मवर्तात्मा न वेद किमुता परे.
The wonderful potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is bewildering even to the jugglers. That potency is unknown even to the self-sufficient Lord, so it is certainly unknown to others. The froggish philosophers and mundane wranglers, and the mundane wranglers in science and mathematical calculation may not believe in the inconceivable potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but they are sometimes puzzled by the wonderful jugglery of man and nature. Such jugglers and magicians of the mundane world are actually puzzled by the jugglery of the Lord in his transcendental activities, but they try to adjust their bewilderment by saying that it is all mythology. There is, however, nothing impossible or mythological in the supreme omnipotent person. The most wonderful puzzle for the mundane wrangler is that while they remain calculating the length and breadth of the unlimited potency of the supreme person, his faithful devotees are set free from the bondage of material engagement simply by appreciating the wonderful jugglery of the supreme in the practical field. The devotees of the Lord see the wonderful dexterity in everything with which they come in contact in all circumstances of eating, sleeping, working, etc. A man, a small banyan fruit contains thousands of small seeds, and each seed holds the potency of another tree, which again holds the potency of many millions of such fruits as cause and effect. So the trees and seeds engage the devotees in meditation about the activities of the Lord, while the mundane wranglers waste time in dry speculation and mental concoction, which are fruitless in both this life and the next. In spite of their pride in speculation, they can never appreciate the simple activities of the banyan tree's potency. Such speculators are poor souls destined to remain in matter perpetually.
मैं पढ़ता हूँ लास्ट. यतो प्राप्य नय वर्तन्त वाचश्च मनसा सह अहम चान्य इमे देवास्त स्मै भगवते नमः.
जी. यतो प्राप्य वर्तन्ते वाचिश्च मनसा सह अहम
अहम चान्य इमे
इसमें भगवते नमः.
World's mind and ego, with their respective controlling demigods, have failed to achieve success in knowing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, we simply have to offer our respectful obeisances unto him as a matter of sanity. The froggish calculator may raise the objection that if the absolute is even unknowable by controlling deities of speech, mind, and ego, namely Vedas, Brahma, and Rudra, and all the demigods headed by Brahaspati, then why should the devotees be so interested in the unknown object? The answer is that the transcendental ecstasy enjoyed by the devotees in delineating the pastimes of the Lord is certainly unknown to non-devotees and mental speculators. Unless one relishes transcendental joy, naturally one will come back from his speculations and concocted conclusions because he will see them as neither factual nor enjoyable. The devotees can at least know that the absolute truth is the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu, as the Vedic hymn confirms. Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam Sada Pashyanti Suryaha. Bhagavad Gita 15.15 also confirms this fact. Vedash cha sarver aham ev vedya. By culture of Vedic knowledge, one must know that Lord Krishna and should not falsely speculate on the word aham or I. The only method for understanding the supreme truth is devotional service, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 15.85. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yaschashmi tatvata. Only by devotional service can one know that the ultimate truth is the personality of Godhead, and that Brahma and Paramatma are only his partial Brahman and Paramatma are only his partial features. This is confirmed in this verse by the great sage Maitreya. With devotion, he offers his sincere surrender, Namah, to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bhagavate. One has to follow in the footsteps of great sages and devotees like Maitreya and Vidur, Maharaja Parikshit and Shukdev Goswami, and engage in the transcendental devotional service of the Lord if one would know his ultimate feature, which is above Brahman and Paramatma. है ना? तो तभी पता चल पाएगा उनके बारे में. Thus ends the Bhakti Vedanta purports of the third canto, 6th chapter of the Srimad Bhagwatam, entitled Creation of the Universal Form. ठीक है?
जी.
Chapter 7. Further inquiries by Vidur. Shri Shuk Uvach. Evam Brahmanam Maitreyan Dvaipayan Suto Buddha. Niryanyu Bharatya Vidura Pratyabhashat.
Shri Shuk Uvach. Evam Brahmanam Maitreyan Dvaipayan Suto Buddha. Niryanyu Bharatya Pratyabhashat.
Shri Shukdev Goswami said, O king, while Maitreya the great sage was thus speaking, Vidur, the learned son of Dvaipavan Vyas, expressed a request in a pleasing manner by asking this question. Vidur, एक और है बस मेरा ये लास्ट.
Okay.
Vidur Uvach. Brahman katham bhagvatischa matrasya vikaraniya. Ilaya chapi yujjeranya gunasya guna kriya.
जी. Vidur Uvach. Brahman katham bhagvatash chin matra isya vikarinah. Ilaya chapi yujjeranya gunasya guna kriya.
Sri Vidura said, O great Brahmana, since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the complete spiritual whole and is unchangeable, how is he connected with the material modes of nature and their activities? If this is his pastime, how do the activities of unchangeable take place and exhibit qualities without modes of nature? Shabari. As described in the previous chapter, the difference between the super soul and the Supreme Lord and the living entities is that the activities of the Lord in creating the cosmic manifestation are performed by the Lord through the agency of his multifarious energies. But this manifestation is bewildering to the living entities. The Lord is therefore the master of energies, whereas the living entities are subjugated by them. By asking various questions about transcendental activities, Vidur is clearing the misconception that when the Lord either descends on the earth in his incarnation or appears himself with all his potencies, he too is subjected to the influence of Maya, just like an ordinary living entity. This is generally the calculation of less intelligent philosophers who consider the position of Lord and that of the living entities to be the same level. Vidur is hearing the great sage Maitreya refute these arguments. The Lord is described in the verse as Chinmatra or completely spiritual. The personality of Godhead has unlimited potencies to create and manifest many wonderful things, both temporary and permanent. Because this material world is the creation of his external energy, it thus appears to be temporary. It is manifest at certain intervals, maintained for some time, and again dissolved and conserved in his own energy. As described in Bhagavad Gita 8.19, Bhutva Bhutva Parilayate. But the creation of his internal but the creation of his internal potency, the spiritual world, is not a temporary manifestation like the material world, but is eternal and full of transcendental knowledge, opulence, energy, strength, beauties, and glories. Such manifestation of the Lord's potencies are eternal and are therefore called nirguna, or free from all tinges of the modes of material nature, even up to the modes of material goodness. The spiritual world is transcendental even to the material goodness and thus is unchangeable. Since the Supreme Lord of such eternal and unchangeable qualities is never subjugated by anything like material influence, how can his activities and forms be conceived to be under the influence of illusory Maya, as is the case with the living entities? A juggler or magician displays many wonders with his acts and arts. He can become a cow by his magical tactics, and yet he is not that cow. But at the same time, the cow is displayed by the magician is not different from him. Similarly, the material potency is not different from the Lord because it is an emanation from him. But at the same time, the manifestation of potency is not the Supreme Lord. The Lord's transcendental knowledge and potency always remain the same. They do not change even when displayed in the material world. As is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord descends on the earth by his own internal potency, and therefore there is no question of his becoming materially contaminated, changed, or otherwise affected by the modes of material nature. The Lord is Saguna by his own internal potency, but at the same time he is Nirguna, since he is not in touch with the material energy. The restrictions of the prison house are applicable to the prisoners who are condemned by the king's law, but the king is never affected by such implications. Although he may visit the prison house out of his goodwill, in the Vishnu Puran, the six opulences of the Lord are stated to be non-different from him. The opulences of transcendental knowledge, strength, opulence, potency, beauty, and renunciation are all identical with the personality of Godhead. When he personally displays such opulences in the material world, they have no connection with the modes of material nature. The very word chin matra is the guarantee that the Lord's activities are always transcendental, even when displayed in the material world. His activities are as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. Otherwise, liberated devotees like Shukdev Goswami would not have been attracted by them. Vidur inquired how the Lord's activities can be in the modes of material nature, as is sometimes miscalculated by the persons of poor fund of knowledge. The inability of the material qualities is due to the difference between the material body and the spirit soul. The conditioned soul's activities are displayed through the medium of modes of material nature and are therefore perverted in appearance. However, the Lord's body and Lord himself are one and the same, and when the Lord activities are displayed, they are certainly non-different from the Lord in all respects. The conclusion is that the person who considers the Lord activities materials are certainly mistaken. यहाँ पर इसीलिए एक बात बड़ा क्लियर हो रही है कि भगवान की एक्टिविटीज इसीलिए ट्रांसेंडेंटल है, इसीलिए कृष्ण कथा सुनना इतना इम्पोर्टेंट है ना? He does not get contaminated in this world. His activities are transcendental. वो दिव्य हैं, वो वो ये तीनों मटेरियल क्वालिटीज है ना, वो सतोगुण, रजोगुण, तमोगुण एंड ऑल दैट्स आर नॉट अफेक्टेड। लगता है वो हम लोग का इल्यूजरी होने की वजह से, है ना। इसीलिए कृष्ण कथा जो सुनना बड़ा इम्पोर्टेंट है ना। यहाँ पे जैसा विदुर ने उनसे पूछा है, ये सवाल ही पूछा, वो ग्रेट ब्राह्मणा सिंस द सुप्रीम पर्सनालिटी ऑफ गॉडेड is the complete spiritual whole and is unchangeable, how he is connected with the material modes of nature and their activities. If this is his pastime, how do the activities of unchangeable take place and exhibit qualities without the modes of nature? कैसे करते हैं ये सब चीजें? इस बैफिल्ड कि भैया कहीं वो ऑर्डिनरी आदमी ही तो नहीं है। हाँ, ये उनका इल्यूजन, ठीक है ना, ये
जी
बात। चलो आज अभी ये यहीं पे करते हैं, फिर शाम को
जी
पढ़ते
जी
हैं, है ना।
जी
बट अच्छा है ये आज का भी क्रम है काफी। फ्रॉग इन द वेल मेंटेलिटी को काफी उन्होंने बार
हम्म
बार बताया है कि
हम्म
ये जो जो मेंटल स्पेकुलेटर है ना, केवल एक ही चीज है, भगवान को जानना भी जरूरी है, बट वो डिवोशनल सर्विस के ही थ्रू,
हम्म
है ना, यही जो
जी
बात है। और ये जो मेन चीज है कि भाई ब्राह्मण क्षत्रिय एंड ऑल दैट आर नॉट बाय बर्थ बट बाय क्वालिफिकेशन, वो सब खत्म हो गया है आज की डेट में। लेकिन अगर आप ये ट्रांसेंडेंटल लिटरेचर पढ़ रहे हैं, देन यू आर काइंड ऑफ एटलीस्ट ए ब्राह्मणा ट्रेनी है।
बिल्कुल।
यू शुड इवेंचुअली स्प्रेड ऑल दिस, ठीक है। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे।
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे।
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे।
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे।
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे।
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। सबको